The champagne glass shattered against the marble floor as Evelyn Cross stared at the massive screen behind the podium. Julian Ashcroft, CEO of Meridian Industries, stood before
Thank
3,000
you all
guests
for being here
celebrating
tonight.
the company's
It is an
centennial
absolute honor to
anniversary.
stand before.
His smile was perfect, his posture commanding, his face impossibly youthful for a man supposedly in his 70s. But that wasn't what made Evelyn's hand tremble and release her drink. It was the photograph she clutched in her other hand, a black and white image from 1924 showing the company's founding board of directors. The man in the center, labeled as J. Ashcroft, founder, was identical to the man on stage. Not similar. Identical. Same sharp jawline. Same penetrating eyes. Same confident stance. The crowd erupted in applause as Ashcroft concluded his speech about continuity, vision, and the power of enduring leadership. Evelyn felt sick. She pushed through the crowd, her investigative instincts screaming that she had stumbled onto something impossible. 6 months earlier, none of this would have mattered to her. Evelyn Cross had been one of the most respected investigative journalists at the Metropolitan Herald until a single story changed everything. Her exposé on city council corruption had been thorough, devastating, and completely accurate. It had also cost the paper 3 major advertisers and resulted in her demotion to the lifestyle section. Human interest pieces, her editor Martin Hale had said with barely concealed satisfaction. Something more, manageable for someone with your particular talents. The Meridian Industries assignment had seemed like punishment disguised as opportunity. Write a fluff piece about the company's 100-year legacy. Focus on innovation, job creation, and community impact. Keep it positive. Keep it safe. Evelyn had accepted the assignment with gritted teeth, knowing she needed the paycheck and couldn't afford to lose another job. She had planned to phone it in a few interviews, some corporate talking points, and a forgettable article that would satisfy her editors and fade into obscurity. But Evelyn Cross had never been good at leaving stones unturned. Her first visit to Meridian's corporate headquarters had been routine. The public relations team gave her the standard tour, gleaming offices, state-of-the-art facilities, and carefully selected employees who spoke glowingly about company culture. She had taken notes dutifully, asked the expected questions, and prepared to write the kind of sanitized corporate profile she despised. The company archives were supposed to be a quick stop for historical background. The archivist, a nervous woman named Patricia, had led her to a climate-controlled room filled with documents, photographs, and artifacts spanning a century of corporate history. "Take your time," Patricia had said. "Everything's organized chronologically. Just let me know if you need anything specific." Evelyn had started with the founding documents from 1924. Meridian Industries had been established by Julian Ashcroft as a small manufacturing company during the post-war economic boom. The early photographs showed a serious young man with dark hair and intense eyes, surrounded by a small team of investors and engineers. She had moved through the decades methodically. The 1930s showed the company surviving the Depression under the leadership of J. Alexander Ashcroft, Jonathan's supposed son. The 1950s featured James Ashcroft expanding into international markets. The 1970s highlighted Julian Ashcroft's revolutionary approach to corporate governance. It was when she laid the photographs side by side that the pattern became impossible to ignore. The faces were identical. Not similar in the way family members might resemble each other. Identical in every detail: the curve of the eyebrows, the shape of the nose, the particular way the left corner of the mouth lifted slightly higher than the right when smiling. Evelyn had stared at the photographs for 20 minutes, her rational mind fighting against what her eyes were telling her. Families often shared strong resemblances. Some people aged well. There had to be a logical explanation. She had requested video footage from the company's archives. Meridian had been progressive in documenting its history, with film reels dating back to the 1940s and complete video records from the 1980s onward. Watching the footage had been like watching the same man age backwards and forwards through time. The voice never changed, the same deep, measured tone with a barely detectable accent that seemed to shift subtly depending on the era. The mannerisms were identical: The way he gestured with his left hand while speaking, the particular pause he took before answering difficult questions, the habit of adjusting his cufflinks when thinking. By the time she left the archives that first day, Evelyn's hands were shaking. She had filled 3 notebooks with observations and taken photographs of everything she could without arousing suspicion. She needed time to process what she had seen, to find the rational explanation that had to exist. She spent the next week researching everything she could find about the Ashcroft family. Public records showed a clear lineage. Jonathan begot J. Alexander, who begot James, who begot Julian. Birth certificates, school records, marriage licenses, all properly documented and filed. But the deeper she dug, the more questions arose. Why were there no photographs of Julian Ashcroft as a child or young man? Why had he never been seen publicly with his supposed father? Why did company employees from the 1980s speak about him as if he had been there for decades, when he would have been barely out of college? Evelyn had always prided herself on following evidence wherever it led, no matter how uncomfortable the destination. But this evidence was leading her somewhere impossible, and she wasn't sure she was brave enough to follow. The breakthrough came during her second visit to the archives. Patricia had been called away for a meeting, leaving Evelyn alone with boxes of unsorted materials from the company's early years. Buried in a collection of personal papers was a leather journal belonging to one of the original investors. The entries were brief and businesslike, recording meetings, decisions, and observations about the young company's progress. But one entry from 1926 made Evelyn's blood run cold. "Ashcroft concerns me. He speaks of plans spanning decades, as if he will personally oversee their implementation. When I mentioned my own retirement in 10 years, he smiled strangely and said, 10 years is nothing. I have seen empires rise and fall in less time. There is something unsettling about his certainty, as if he knows something the rest of us do not." Another entry from 1928, "Ashcroft has not aged a day since we began this venture. I know it has only been 4 years, but the man looks exactly as he did when we first met. Perhaps it is good breeding, or perhaps I am imagining things. Still, there is something about his eyes that suggests depths I cannot fathom." The final relevant entry was from 1931. "I have decided to sell my shares back to Ashcroft. The man frightens me. Yesterday, he spoke casually about events from the 1890s as if he had witnessed them personally. When I pointed out that he would have been a child then, he simply smiled and said, 'Time moves differently for some people. I want no part of whatever he truly is.'" Evelyn had photographed every page with trembling fingers. The journal provided context for her visual evidence, but it also raised terrifying new questions. If Julian Ashcroft was somehow the same man who had founded the company a century ago, what did that make him? And what happened to people who discovered his secret? Her research into the Metropolitan Herald's own archives provided a chilling answer. In 1934, a reporter named Clara Whitfield had written a series of articles investigating irregularities in the leadership succession at Meridian Industries. The first 2 articles had been published, raising questions about the company's corporate structure and the mysterious absence of documentation regarding leadership transitions. The third article had never appeared. Clara Whitfield's byline had simply vanished from the paper without explanation. Evelyn found a brief mention in the obituaries 6 months later. Clara had died in a car accident while investigating a story. No details were provided about what story she had been working on. Evelyn's editor, Martin Hale, had not been receptive to her concerns. "You're seeing patterns that aren't there," he had said dismissively when she tried to explain her findings. "Rich families have good genes and expensive skincare. They also have the resources to maintain detailed records and professional photography. You're looking at a century of careful image management, nothing more." But the video footage shows a family that breeds true. Look at the Kennedys, the Rockefellers, any old money dynasty. They all look like variations on a theme. It's called genetics, Evelyn, not a conspiracy. Martin had leaned back in his chair, his expression growing stern. "I'm going to be very clear about this. You were assigned to write a positive piece about Meridian Industries. The company is a major advertiser, they employ thousands of people, and they have an impeccable reputation. I will not allow you to jeopardize this paper's relationship with them based on some half-baked theory about immortal CEOs. What if it's not half-baked? What if there's really something? Then you'll find yourself looking for a new job, Martin had interrupted. Again. Focus on the assignment, Evelyn. Write about innovation, community impact, job creation. Leave the science fiction to other publications. The warning had been clear, but Evelyn couldn't let it go. She continued her research quietly, using her own time and resources. She reached out to former Meridian employees, hoping to find someone who might have noticed the same inconsistencies she had observed. Most of her calls went unanswered. Those who did respond were polite but unhelpful, offering generic praise for the company and its leadership without providing any useful details. It was as if everyone associated with Meridian had been trained to give the same scripted responses. Then she found Walter Green. Walter was 93 years old and living in a modest apartment across town. He had worked as an accountant for Meridian from 1951 to 1987, and unlike the other former employees she had contacted, he was willing to meet in person. "I remember you," he had said when she called. "You're the one who exposed those city council crooks. Good work." Those bastards had it coming. They met at a small diner near Walter's apartment. He was frail but alert, with sharp blue eyes that missed nothing. Evelyn had brought several photographs from different eras, hoping to test his memory without revealing her suspicions. "Oh, that's Mr. Ashcroft," Walter had said immediately when she showed him a photo from 1965. "Good man. Fair boss." Never raised his voice, but you knew not to disappoint him. She showed him another photo, this one from 1983. "Still Mr. Ashcroft," Walter had said with a slight frown. "Though he looks exactly the same as when I started working there 30 years earlier. I used to joke that he had a painting in his attic like that Dorian Gray fellow." Evelyn's pulse quickened. "You noticed that he didn't age?" Walter's expression grew serious. "Lady, in 36 years of working for that company, I never saw that man change. Not his appearance, not his mannerisms, not even his handwriting. I've seen 3 generations of other executives come and go, watched them grow old and retire or die. But Mr. Ashcroft," he shook his head slowly, "that man never changes." Did anyone else notice? A few of us talked about it quietly. But people who asked too many questions about Mr. Ashcroft had a way of moving on. Sometimes to other companies, sometimes to other cities. Sometimes they just disappeared from their desks one day and were never mentioned again. Walter leaned forward, his voice dropping to a whisper. "I'll tell you something else. In 1974, we had a new hire in accounting, young guy fresh out of college. He was organizing old files and found some personnel records from the 1940s. Started asking questions about why Mr. Ashcroft's employment file showed a start date of 1924 but no birth date, no social security number, no emergency contacts. What happened to him? Found dead in his apartment 3 days later. Gas leak, they said. Tragic accident. But I knew that boy, and he was careful about things like that. Too careful for such a stupid mistake." Evelyn felt a chill run down her spine. "You think it wasn't an accident?" Walter was quiet for a long moment, staring into his coffee cup. "I think some secrets are worth killing for. And I think you should be very careful about how far you dig into this one." Despite Walter's warning, Evelyn couldn't stop investigating. The story had taken hold of her like a fever, consuming her thoughts and driving her to take increasingly dangerous risks. She began following Julian Ashcroft, documenting his daily routines and public appearances. What she observed defied rational explanation. Ashcroft moved through the world with an eerie confidence, as if he had navigated every possible situation countless times before. He never seemed surprised by anything, never appeared to struggle with decisions, never showed uncertainty about the future. More disturbing were the small details that suggested inhuman perception. She watched him identify people in crowds before they spoke to him, as if he could sense their approach from impossible distances. She saw him answer questions in board meetings before they were fully articulated, finishing other people's thoughts with uncanny accuracy. During a public speaking engagement, she observed him deliver a 40-minute presentation without notes, never hesitating or losing his train of thought. But it wasn't just the flawless delivery that unsettled her, it was the way he spoke about historical events with the intimacy of personal experience, describing the Great Depression and World War II as if he had lived through them as an adult rather than learning about them from books. After 3 weeks of surveillance, Evelyn received an unexpected phone call. "Miss Cross? This is Julian Ashcroft. I understand you've been researching a story about my company." His voice was exactly as she remembered from the archival footage, deep, cultured, with that subtle accent that seemed to shift between British and something older, more refined. "Mr. Ashcroft. Yes, I'm working on a piece about Meridian's centennial. So I've heard. I was hoping we might meet in person to discuss your project. I believe I could provide some insights that would be valuable to your readers." The invitation should have been a journalist's dream, exclusive access to one of the most powerful and reclusive CEOs in the world. Instead, it filled Evelyn with dread. Men like Julian Ashcroft didn't personally call reporters unless something significant was at stake. "I'd be honored to meet with you," she managed to say. "Excellent. Tomorrow evening, 7 o'clock. I'll send a car to your apartment." The line went dead before she could ask how he knew her address. The car that arrived the next evening was a sleek black sedan with tinted windows and a driver who spoke only to confirm her identity. They drove through the city for 20 minutes before pulling up to a nondescript office building in the financial district. Evelyn was escorted to a private elevator that required a key card to operate. It rose silently to the 40th floor, opening into an elegant reception area that felt more like the lobby of an exclusive hotel than a corporate office. Julian Ashcroft was waiting for her in a conference room with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city. He stood as she entered, extending a hand in greeting. His grip was firm and warm, entirely human, but there was something in his eyes that made her skin crawl, an ancient intelligence that seemed to see through her completely. "Miss Cross, thank you for coming. Please sit." He was exactly as she had seen him in photographs and video footage, tall, impeccably dressed, with dark hair and sharp features that belonged on a man 30 years younger. Up close, his ageless quality was even more pronounced. His skin showed no signs of wear, his posture was perfect, and his movements had the fluid grace of someone in peak physical condition. "I trust the research for your article has been productive," he said, settling into the chair across from her. "Very productive. Meridian has a fascinating history." "Indeed it does. A century of growth, innovation, and adaptation. Not many companies survive that long, let alone thrive as we have." Evelyn opened her notebook, trying to project professional confidence despite her growing unease. "I'd love to hear your perspective on the company's longevity. What do you attribute Meridian's success to?" Ashcroft smiled, and she noticed that his teeth were perfect, too perfect for a man of any age. "Continuity, Miss Cross. Consistency of vision and purpose. Too many companies fail because they lose sight of their founding principles when leadership changes. Meridian has been fortunate to maintain a clear sense of direction across multiple generations. The Ashcroft family has certainly shown remarkable dedication to the company." "We have indeed." His eyes never left her face as he spoke. "Each generation has built upon the work of the previous one, maintaining the same standards and pursuing the same long-term objectives." Evelyn felt as if she were walking through a minefield, each question potentially triggering an explosion. "I've noticed some interesting consistencies in the company's leadership style over the decades. The archives show a remarkable similarity in management philosophy across different eras." "Good breeding and careful mentorship," Ashcroft replied smoothly. "My father taught me everything he knew, just as his father had taught him. We believe in preserving what works rather than changing for the sake of change." "Your father must have been an extraordinary teacher." "The company's direction has been remarkably consistent." Something flickered in Ashcroft's eyes, amusement, perhaps, or recognition that she was probing deeper than her questions suggested. "He was indeed extraordinary. Though I suspect you're more interested in my own tenure than my family's history." The statement hung in the air like a challenge. Evelyn felt her heart rate increase, but she pressed forward. "I am curious about your leadership style. Employees I've spoken with describe you as someone who seems to have an almost supernatural understanding of business cycles and market trends. Experience, Miss Cross. When you've seen enough patterns, you learn to recognize them before they fully develop. How long have you been with the company? Longer than most people realize. The answer was deliberately ambiguous, and his slight smile suggested he was enjoying her discomfort. Evelyn decided to take a more direct approach. I've been reviewing the company archives extensively. There are some interesting photographs and documents that raise questions about the timeline of leadership transitions. Ashcroft leaned back in his chair, his expression becoming more serious. What kind of questions? Questions about continuity. About whether the transitions were as clear-cut as the official records suggest. I see. He was quiet for a moment, studying her with those unsettling eyes. Miss Cross, may I ask you something? In your career as an investigative journalist, have you ever encountered a story that was too dangerous to tell? The question caught her off guard. I believe the truth should always be told, regardless of the consequences. A noble sentiment, but not always a practical one. He stood and walked to the window, gazing out at the city lights below. There are truths that serve no purpose except to create chaos and fear. Truths that would destabilize institutions, destroy lives, and accomplish nothing positive. Who decides which truths are too dangerous? Those with the wisdom to understand the consequences. He turned back to face her. You're an intelligent woman, Miss Cross. You've built a reputation on your ability to uncover hidden facts and expose corruption. But what you're investigating now isn't corruption. It's something far more complex. Evelyn felt a chill run down her spine. What exactly do you think I'm investigating? You tell me. What do you believe you've discovered? The moment of truth had arrived. Evelyn could continue pretending to write a puff piece, or she could confront him directly with her evidence. Her journalistic instincts won. I believe you're the same man who founded this company in 1924. I believe you've been running Meridian Industries for 100 years without aging. And I believe you've been eliminating anyone who gets too close to that truth. Ashcroft was silent for a long moment, his expression unreadable. When he finally spoke, his voice was calm and measured. That's quite an accusation, Miss Cross. Do you have evidence to support such an extraordinary claim? Evelyn opened her briefcase and spread photographs across the conference table, images spanning a century, all showing the same face. This is my evidence. You haven't aged a day in 100 years. He studied the photographs with mild interest, as if seeing them for the first time. Remarkable family resemblance, wouldn't you say? It's more than resemblance. It's identical. The same face, the same voice, the same mannerisms. I have video footage going back to the 1940s. You're the same person. And what do you intend to do with this theory? I intend to publish it. The world has a right to know. Ashcroft nodded slowly, as if he had expected this response. I see. And have you considered what publication might cost you? Are you threatening me? I'm asking if you've thought through the implications. Your editor has already expressed skepticism about your research. Your reputation has been damaged by previous controversies. Who do you think will believe such an outlandish story? Evelyn felt her confidence wavering. He was right about the challenges she would face, but she couldn't let fear stop her from pursuing the truth. Someone will listen. Someone will investigate further. Perhaps. But by then, you'll have destroyed your career and credibility. You'll be dismissed as a conspiracy theorist, a journalist who lost her grip on reality. Is that really how you want to be remembered? Better than being remembered as someone who stayed silent when she discovered something this important. Ashcroft returned to his seat, his demeanor shifting subtly. The polite corporate executive was gone, replaced by something older and more calculating. Miss Cross, I'm going to share something with you that I've shared with very few people over the years. You're correct in your assessment. I am the man who founded this company in 1924. I am also the man who has guided its growth and evolution for the past century. Evelyn's breath caught in her throat. She had expected denials, deflection, perhaps even threats. She hadn't expected a confession. How? She whispered. That's not the important question. The important question is why. Why have I maintained this position for so long? Why have I dedicated a century to building and preserving this institution? Tell me. Because stability requires continuity, Miss Cross. Because human institutions fail when they're subject to the chaos of constant leadership change. Meridian Industries employs over 200,000 people worldwide. Their livelihoods, their families, their communities, all depend on the continued success of this company. He leaned forward, his eyes intense. In the past century, I've guided this company through 2 world wars, the Great Depression, multiple recessions, technological revolutions, and countless other challenges that have destroyed lesser institutions. I've provided stability in an unstable world. By deceiving everyone about who you are. By doing what was necessary. Do you think those 200,000 employees care about my age, Miss Cross? Do you think the communities that depend on our factories and offices would benefit from the chaos that would follow if your story were published? Evelyn struggled to process what she was hearing. You're asking me to stay silent about the biggest story of the century because it might be inconvenient? I'm asking you to consider the broader implications of your actions. Truth isn't always beneficial, Miss Cross. Sometimes the greater good requires certain truths to remain hidden. And what about Clara Whitfield? What about the accountant who died in a gas leak? Were their deaths part of serving the greater good? Ashcroft's expression didn't change. I regret those losses. But some secrets are worth protecting at any cost. The casual admission of murder sent ice through Evelyn's veins. She was sitting across from a man who had killed to protect his secret and would clearly do so again. You're threatening to kill me if I publish this story. I'm hoping we can reach a more civilized arrangement. He opened a folder that had been sitting on the table between them. I've prepared an offer for your consideration. Inside the folder was a contract, an employment agreement with Meridian Industries offering her a position as Director of Corporate Communications at a salary 3 times what she earned at the Herald. You're trying to buy me off. I'm offering you an opportunity to use your talents in service of something larger than yourself. You would have access to resources beyond anything you've experienced as a newspaper reporter. You could shape public understanding of important issues, influence policy, make a real difference in the world. Evelyn stared at the contract, her mind reeling. The offer was tempting: financial security, professional prestige, the chance to work on a scale she had never imagined. But it would also mean becoming complicit in covering up the truth. And if I refuse? Then you'll return to your newspaper and write whatever story you choose. But I should warn you that certain evidence you've collected may prove difficult to verify. Archives have a way of being reorganized. Witnesses sometimes reconsider their statements, and digital files can be corrupted or lost. The threat was clear. Even if she tried to publish the story, he would use his resources to discredit her evidence and destroy her credibility. You've done this before, haven't you? Made this same offer to other journalists who got too close. I've found that most reasonable people can be persuaded to see the bigger picture. And those who can't be persuaded? Face the consequences of their choices. Evelyn closed the folder and pushed it back across the table. I need time to think about this. Of course. Take all the time you need. But don't take too long, Miss Cross. Opportunities like this don't remain open indefinitely. The drive back to her apartment passed in a blur. Evelyn's mind raced as she tried to process everything that had happened. Julian Ashcroft had confirmed her most impossible suspicions, admitted to murder, and offered her a choice between wealth and death. She spent the next 3 days in her apartment, barely eating or sleeping, wrestling with the decision that would define the rest of her life. She reviewed her evidence obsessively, looking for ways to make it bulletproof, but she knew Ashcroft had the resources to discredit anything she published. She thought about Clara Whitfield and the accountant who had died asking questions. She thought about the 200,000 people who depended on Meridian for their livelihoods. She thought about the truth and what it was worth. On the 4th day, she made her decision. Evelyn spent the next week preparing meticulously. She copied all her evidence to multiple secure locations, created detailed documentation of her investigation, and recorded a video statement explaining everything she had discovered. She arranged for the materials to be automatically released if anything happened to her. Then she called Julian Ashcroft. I've made my decision, she told him. I'm going to publish the story. There was a long pause before he responded. I'm disappointed, Miss Cross. I had hoped you would be more reasonable. I'm being perfectly reasonable. I'm a journalist, and this is the story of a lifetime. Very well. I respect your choice, even if I disagree with it. When do you plan to publish? Tomorrow morning. The story will run in the Herald and be simultaneously released online. I see. Miss Cross, before you proceed, I want you to understand something. What you're about to do will change your life in ways you can't imagine. Are you prepared for those consequences? I'm prepared for whatever happens. I hope you are. Goodbye, Miss Cross. The line went dead. Evelyn submitted her story to the Herald that evening, along with a note to Martin Hale explaining that she was prepared to stake her career on its accuracy. She also sent copies to 3 other newspapers and 2 online publications, ensuring that the story would see the light of day even if the Herald refused to publish it. She barely slept that night, expecting at any moment to hear footsteps in the hallway or see shadows moving past her windows. But morning came without incident, and she checked the Herald's website anxiously for her story. It wasn't there. She called Martin Hale, who informed her that the story had been killed. The legal department reviewed it and determined that we couldn't publish without exposing ourselves to massive liability, he explained. The claims you're making are extraordinary, and the evidence is circumstantial at best. Martin, this is the biggest story of our lifetimes. This is career suicide, Evelyn. I'm sorry, but I can't let you destroy this newspaper's reputation based on a conspiracy theory. Evelyn hung up and immediately called the other publications she had contacted. One by one, they told her the same thing: the story was too risky, the evidence too weak, the potential legal consequences too severe. By noon, it was clear that no one would publish her story. Somehow, Julian Ashcroft had reached every editor, every publisher, every decision-maker, and convinced them to stay silent. Her phone rang at exactly 1 o'clock. Good afternoon, Miss Cross. I trust you've had an enlightening morning. How did you do it? How did you get to everyone so quickly? I've had a century to build relationships, Miss Cross. When you've been in business as long as I have, you develop certain influences. Evelyn felt defeated, but she wasn't ready to give up entirely. This isn't over. I'll find another way to tell this story. I'm sure you'll try. But I should mention that your evidence has become somewhat unreliable. The company archives you accessed have been reorganized, and I'm afraid some materials may have been misfiled or damaged. Your witness, Mr. Green, has decided to spend his remaining years in a comfortable retirement community in Florida, where he's unlikely to give any more interviews. You can't suppress the truth forever. Miss Cross, I've been suppressing this particular truth for a century. I've become quite good at it. Someone will figure it out eventually. Someone will ask the right questions. Perhaps. And when they do, I'll deal with them just as I've dealt with you and all the others who came before. The truth, Miss Cross, is only as powerful as people's willingness to believe it and act upon it. Without evidence, without witnesses, without publication, your truth is nothing more than an interesting theory. Evelyn realized with growing horror that he was right. Without her evidence, without corroboration, without any platform to share her discoveries, she had nothing. She was just another journalist with an outlandish story that no one would believe. However, Ashcroft continued, my offer remains open. The position at Meridian Industries is still available, along with all the benefits we discussed. You've proven yourself to be remarkably resourceful and determined. Those are qualities I value highly. You want to hire the person who tried to expose you? I want to hire someone who understands the importance of discretion and the value of loyalty. Your investigation was thorough and professional. Imagine what you could accomplish with proper resources and support. Evelyn closed her eyes, feeling the weight of her failure. She had come so close to exposing one of the greatest secrets in human history, only to have it slip through her fingers like smoke. If I take the job, what guarantee do I have that you won't simply eliminate me once I'm no longer useful? You have my word that as long as you remain loyal to Meridian Industries and respect the confidentiality of what you've learned, you'll be safe and valued. I don't dispose of useful assets, Miss Cross. I cultivate them. And if I refuse the job and try to continue investigating, then you'll find that your career in journalism has effectively ended. No reputable publication will hire someone who tried to publish such an obviously delusional story. You'll be relegated to conspiracy websites and tabloids, your credibility permanently destroyed. The choice was stark: join him or be destroyed by him. Evelyn had spent her entire career fighting for truth and justice, but she was beginning to understand that some battles couldn't be won through conventional means. I need time to consider your offer. Of course. But don't wait too long, Miss Cross. Opportunities have a way of disappearing if they're not seized promptly. Over the next week, Evelyn discovered just how thoroughly Julian Ashcroft controlled information flow. Her attempts to share her story through social media were met with account suspensions and content removal. Her efforts to contact other journalists resulted in polite but firm rejections. Even her attempt to upload her evidence to a public file-sharing site failed when the files mysteriously became corrupted. It was as if Ashcroft had anticipated every possible avenue she might use to disseminate the truth and had quietly closed them off. She began to understand the true scope of his power, not just financial influence, but a network of relationships and obligations built over a century of careful cultivation. She also began to notice subtle changes in her daily life. Her landlord mentioned that her lease might not be renewed. Her credit card company called to discuss some irregularities in her account. Her car failed its inspection due to problems that hadn't existed the week before. The message was clear: her life could be made increasingly difficult if she continued to resist his offer. On a Friday evening, exactly 2 weeks after her meeting with Ashcroft, Evelyn sat in her apartment staring at the contract he had given her. The position at Meridian Industries represented everything she had once claimed to despise: corporate propaganda, truth suppression, complicity in a massive deception. But it also represented survival. Her phone rang at exactly 8 o'clock. Miss Cross, I hope you've had time to fully consider our discussion. I have. And what have you decided? Evelyn took a deep breath, feeling as if she were stepping off a cliff into an abyss. I'll take the job. Excellent. I'm pleased that you've chosen to be practical. You'll start Monday morning. My assistant will send you all the necessary details. Mr. Ashcroft. Julian, can I ask you something? Of course. How many others have there been? How many journalists, investigators, researchers who discovered your secret? Over the past century? Perhaps a dozen who came as close as you did. Most were easier to discourage or redirect. A few required more permanent solutions. And now I'm just another one who chose to stay silent. No, Miss Cross. You're the first one I've chosen to bring inside. The others were either too weak to be useful or too stubborn to be trusted. You've demonstrated both the intelligence to uncover the truth and the wisdom to recognize when that truth serves no beneficial purpose. Is that supposed to make me feel better about selling out? It should make you feel proud of your survival instincts. The world is full of people who died for principles that accomplished nothing. You've chosen to live and potentially accomplish something meaningful. After he hung up, Evelyn sat in her apartment for hours, wondering if she had made the right choice. She had become everything she had once despised: a journalist who had chosen money and security over truth and integrity. But she was alive, and that had to count for something. Monday morning arrived gray and cold, matching Evelyn's mood as she reported to Meridian Industries for her first day of work. The building that had once represented a target for investigation now felt like a prison where she would serve an indefinite sentence. Julian Ashcroft met her personally in the executive suite, his manner warm and welcoming as if their previous confrontation had never occurred. Welcome to Meridian Industries, Miss Cross. I think you'll find this work far more satisfying than newspaper journalism. What exactly will I be doing? Managing our public image, crafting our corporate messaging, ensuring that the public understands our mission and values. You'll have a team of talented professionals working under your direction and a budget that will seem unlimited compared to your previous experience. He led her to a spacious office with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city. The space was elegant and sophisticated, furnished with expensive furniture and state-of-the-art technology. This is your office. I trust you'll find it suitable. Evelyn walked to the window and looked out at the city below. Somewhere out there were other journalists pursuing other stories, fighting for truth and justice as she once had. She wondered if any of them would ever stumble across the same evidence she had found, and what would happen to them if they did. Miss Cross, I want you to understand something important about your new role. You're not here simply to suppress information or mislead the public. Meridian Industries does genuine good in the world. We employ hundreds of thousands of people. We drive innovation. We contribute to economic stability. Your job will be to help people understand that good work, and to make sure they never ask uncomfortable questions about the company's leadership. That's part of it, yes. But it's not the whole story. You'll be surprised how much positive impact you can have when you're working with proper resources and support. Over the following months, Evelyn discovered that Ashcroft hadn't been entirely wrong. Her new position did allow her to accomplish things that would have been impossible as a newspaper reporter. She oversaw public education campaigns about environmental protection, helped coordinate disaster relief efforts, and developed programs to support journalism education at universities. But she also found herself crafting carefully worded statements that obscured uncomfortable truths, managing media coverage to avoid unwanted scrutiny, and occasionally helping to discredit journalists who were asking the wrong questions about Meridian Industries. Each compromise felt like another small death, another piece of her integrity sacrificed on the altar of survival and security. The worst part was how easy it became. After years of struggling financially as a newspaper reporter, the comfort of a generous salary and comprehensive benefits was seductive. The respect that came with her corporate title was gratifying after years of being dismissed and marginalized. The sense of influence and importance was addictive. She began to understand how Julian Ashcroft had maintained his secret for so long. It wasn't just through threats and violence, it was through the systematic corruption of anyone who might pose a threat, turning potential enemies into complicit allies. 6 months into her new position, Evelyn received a call from a young reporter at a competing newspaper. The woman had been investigating Meridian Industries and had some questions about the company's corporate structure and leadership history. "I found some interesting inconsistencies in the public records," the reporter explained. "I was hoping you might be able to help me understand the timeline of leadership transitions." Evelyn felt a familiar chill run down her spine. Another journalist had stumbled onto the same trail she had followed. Another person was about to discover the truth that had destroyed her own career and integrity. "I'd be happy to help clarify any confusion," Evelyn heard herself saying. "Why don't we meet in person to discuss your questions?" As she hung up the phone, Evelyn realized that she had become the very thing she had once fought against: a guardian of secrets, a protector of lies, a person who would help destroy another journalist's pursuit of truth. She stared out her office window at the city below, wondering if this was how Julian Ashcroft had felt during his first decades of deception. Had he once been idealistic and principled? Had he gradually compromised his values until corruption became second nature? Or had he always been something inhuman, something that never understood the difference between truth and lies, right and wrong? That evening, Evelyn sat in her expensive apartment, surrounded by the luxuries her new salary had afforded her, and tried to remember who she had been before Julian Ashcroft had offered her a choice between truth and survival. She had chosen survival, but she was beginning to wonder if the person who had made that choice was still alive in any meaningful sense. The next morning, she would meet with the young reporter and begin the process of destroying another person's pursuit of truth. She would use her skills, her experience, and her resources to protect Julian Ashcroft's secret, just as others had protected it before her. And somewhere in the city, Julian Ashcroft would continue his century-long masquerade, ageless and unchanging, secure in the knowledge that truth was only as powerful as people's willingness to sacrifice everything for it. Most people, as Evelyn had learned, were not willing to make that sacrifice. As she prepared for bed that night, Evelyn wondered how many others like her were out there, former truth seekers who had been converted into truth suppressors, idealists who had been transformed into pragmatists, journalists who had become guardians of the very secrets they had once sought to expose. The thought that she was not alone in her corruption was somehow both comforting and terrifying. Outside her window, the city continued its nightly rhythm, unaware that one of its most powerful figures had been walking among them for over a century. accumulating influence and eliminating threats with the patience of someone who had all the time in the world. Julian Ashcroft's secret was safe for another generation, protected not just by his wealth and influence, but by the carefully cultivated complicity of those who had once sought to expose him. The truth was out there, buried in archives and hidden in testimonies, waiting for the next journalist brave enough or foolish enough to dig for it. And when that person inevitably appeared, they would face the same choice Evelyn had faced: join the conspiracy or be destroyed by it. The cycle would continue, as it had for a century, as it would for centuries to come. Truth, as Julian Ashcroft had learned long ago, was a luxury that most people simply couldn't afford. If this investigation into the impossible has captivated you, make sure to subscribe for more mind-bending mysteries that challenge everything you think you know about reality. Hit that like button if this story left you questioning what secrets might be hiding in plain sight, and drop a comment below. Do you think Evelyn made the right choice, or would you have risked everything for the truth? The next story we uncover might be even more shocking than this one. ****